First of all, we should open up that I think we're both in agreement that any civilian killed is one civilian too much. I view Palestinians as my cousins. I think Israel has the responsibility to create a better reality for all those in this land, given that it currently has the power, has the responsibility to create to do so. And in many ways, it has failed pre-October 7th, during October 7th, and post-October 7th. But, it was interesting that you said that you didn't see it as a genocide. And then the moment they blocked humanitarian aid, without giving the context as to why they blocked humanitarian aid, that they only blocked it at certain times when Hamas was stealing that aid and then selling it to their people for very high prices. And they did so that Hamas wouldn't get access to those supplies, but after that gave back all the supplies necessary to the real people. But even if it was the intention of Israel to block over supplies, that still wouldn't be a genocide. A genocide is an intentional elimination of a large population because of their ethnic background or who they are. And that has definitely not been happening in Israel. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have individuals like Smotrich or Ben-Gvir who say deplorable things and horrible things that can be condemned, should be condemned, and that are definitely anti-Palestinian in their rhetoric. But no one has ever said we need to commit a genocide and kill all people. It's a term that has a value and that has a definition, because if there was a country X that decided to kill all of the population in country Y, that would be a genocide. If there is an ethnic conflict for which there are things that are happening not right on both sides and there should be critique, we should critique the specific things, go in depth into those specific things, how they happen, how they can be changed, and not just throw this term like genocide, which didn't wait for October 7th to be thrown. I have plenty of videos over the years where people have been throwing apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing, colonization, settlements, which is interesting because that's what the West did to the world. The West did apartheids and genocides and ethnic cleansing and colonization and settlements. And today's far left of the West, which is not that better of the far right, they believe that they're so guilty for the crimes that their ancestors that rather than looking in the mirror and dealing with what they've dealt with, they're pushing off their white guilt onto the Jewish people and blaming the Jews for what they've done in this world. Now, has there been everything perfect that Israel has done? I can tell you no. Obviously, I've seen that in every attempt Israel could have, it tried to minimize casualties. When I went into Khan Yunis, I was the first unit in. There was not a soldier there before. There were leaflets on the floor that had warned days before for people that were living in Khan Yunis to evacuate the location. If Israel wanted to maximize the amount of civilian deaths, then it wouldn't have warned the civilians to leave. And it did so in every single way. There are many times where we couldn't go and operate in a specific area because there were civilians. But when you're at war, it's very complicated. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't valid critiques to be had. I have my own critiques. I thought about it when I was in Gaza. I was like, well, there are a lot of innocent people here. Why don't we take the women and the children that are, let's say, under 13 years old at least, and make a little refuge place and bring all those people there and start evacuating people that we've cleared into a green zone so that we know who we're dealing with. And at least the people who are civilians won't be in there. So I had my own critiques of things that could have been done differently to minimize civilian casualties. But at the end of the day, I'm not on the top. And although there are critiques, it doesn't mean that the intention of Israel was to minimize or to maximize those casualties. I will also add that, like I said earlier, Israel has the responsibility to deal with the situation. Although we did not create this conflict, I would blame it more on the British that forced both populations to experience each other as the enemies to their own stories and convinced us to see it that way. And we failed in 48 and in 67 and 73 and in every single attempt to create something together. Today, Israel has the power. And, for the past over 10 years, the Hamas has taken over power in that region. Why didn't we try to stop the education and the brainwashing that was happening and the horrible situation that was happening in Gaza? I didn't need to go into Gaza and to pull out 3 suitcases filled with Hamas propaganda that teaches them in their education system, in their UNRWA books, in their math textbooks, in their history books, how the Jew is the most honorable thing that you should do to kill. And I saw the same thing from Hezbollah when I got into Lebanon. We all knew that this was going on. So why didn't Israel do something to change the situation and not just to protect the Israeli side, but to create a better reality for the Palestinian side as well? So I'd like to mention that. Now, in terms of collective punishment, I don't think it's in the interest of the Israeli government to end this war, not because they don't want to save the hostages or end the war, but because it's in the interest of other people who control them to keep the war going. I've been very critical of U.S. foreign aid that are supplying weapons to all sides. And the way U.S. policy has always been working is you align yourself with a strong country in a region, you maintain that there's a conflict going on, you pump weapons to both sides, and in order to keep Israel down, because it does compete with America, to make sure it's always down, you make sure that there's a constant conflict there. They keep having credit, the weapon companies keep profiting, and in the meantime, the Palestinians and Israelis are keep dying. So it's not in the benefit of Israel to keep this war on, it's not in the benefit of Palestinians to keep this war on, it's in the benefit of certain countries and corporations that are profiting from this. And if we were more specific and united as a people from this region, both Israelis and Palestinians and other Middle Easterners to change that structure and to call out those systems and to change the way that we have those relations with foreign countries, then we would see a valid change. And I'd like to touch on a last thing, and I think this is something that we might disagree on. The West Bank, which is also called Judea and Samaria for thousands of years. I mean, if you dig in the land, you find Jewish history. You don't find the British history that's named the land West Bank because it's west to the Jordan River. This is the ancient homeland to the Jewish people. Hebron, Shechem, Bethlehem. I mean, even Shechem, which was renamed to Nablus, which is a mispronunciation of the colonial name. Neapolis, what the Romans named it. And because in Arabic, you don't have the letter P, you say B, it became Neapolis, which is fine. Palestinians have the right to live there. And most Palestinians actually descend from Jews who were converted to Christianity and Islam. So they're absolutely native to this land. And I view them as my cousins and people rightful owner, but Jews have a right to live there. So a Jew living in Judea and Samaria, building a village, is not making a settler. In every situation, the word settler means someone who builds a settlement, someone who's a foreigner. Jews are not foreigners to Judea. So although if a illegal village is built, that should be condemned. And every time an illegal village was built, it was destroyed in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. We should be against illegal building on any side. If a Palestinian were to come in to build into my own apartment, that would be wrong. If a Jew were to go and build in a Palestinian territory, that would also be wrong. Let's say they have a farm and they're building on that farm. That should be wrong no matter what. We're human beings and we should live by law. But a Jew deciding to live in Judea and Samaria, wanting to live side by side with other Palestinians who've always lived there, living there legally, respectfully, not taking away anything, buying everything legally, that doesn't make them a foreigner. That doesn't make them a settler. So I have a particular problem with that because there's an attempt to make both sides seem as if they're coming from abroad. A lot of people who are on the extremist Israeli side claim that Palestinians are just a bunch of foreign Arabs who came and colonized the land. Although there were many foreign Arabs who came and colonized the land, the majority of Palestinians are definitely not that demographic. They are people who are native to this land. And the Jews who either have stayed or who are coming back to their land are not foreign Europeans. They are Middle Easterners. Some of them had a diasporic experience in Europe. Most of them had experiences elsewhere. The majority of the population in Israel is not even Ashkenazi. It's Sephardi and Mizrahi, like my background, that grew up in Algeria and Morocco and other places that my grandparents were living in. But our population, no matter where we spread to, all come from this land. So I think the greater conversation is how do we create a reality that fulfills the aspirations of both collectives, which do not compete and are also different if we break them down? And how do we end the injustices that we both experience that are also different and do not challenge each other if we actually try to find something together? And that's something that has never been done. And a lot of people from abroad are pointing fingers at one side or the next. I'm not saying in this conversation what's happening, but I'm saying in general, usually they're pointing fingers at one and making them seem as the source of all problems. Palestinian source of all problems, Israeli source of all problems. No, there is no future where Israelis or Palestinians disappear. It's time that we come together, that we're also honest with who we are, with what our intentions are, with what our aspirations are. And both of us see the land from the river to the sea, which includes Gaza. No respectable Palestinian would be even respected in Palestinian society if they were to suggest to live in a two-state solution. They don't want that. They want to live from the river to the sea. And I respect that. You know why? Because I do too. There's no reality where I will give up on Gaza. There's no reality where I'll give up on Judea and Samaria. And there's no reality where they'll give up on Safed and on Yaffo and on other places that exist in this land. So at some point, we need to create a one civilization reality. I'm avoiding the term one state because a one state implies extending the current political structures that we have in Israel, which in itself don't work for Israelis and those who are living in this land, to create a reality that works for both populations that allows us to transcend actually what we've been going through. And unfortunately, that has never been taking place. But inshallah, B'ezrat Hashem, in our generation, we will.
Wajahat, your thoughts? I can ask a follow-up question, but I just want to give you a chance if there's anything in particular.
Yeah, there was a lot there. So I think first let's start with points of agreement. I think we agree that in time of doubt, blame the British and European powers of the 20th century for effing up so much. And I think it's one of those factors. I say that facetiously, but in all seriousness, oftentimes what's lost is the role of foreign powers in helping create this terrible situation for all the people and the entire region, right? And the British are extremely responsible, especially in the post-World War I climate. And then once they effed up, they washed their hands of it, gave it to the United Nations, who then made the disastrous decision, especially for Palestinians, right, to carve up the land, 55% to Jews who always lived there, but there were a minority when it comes to both land ownership and numbers, 40% to Palestinians and 5% was for Jerusalem, right? That was supposed to be shared. But instead, what happened was about 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled from land. So the realization of the dream of Zionism, right, for